In February of 2009, Tiger Woods was untouchable, 14 majors deep, with Accenture paying him tens of millions of dollars to be the face of trustworthy leadership. 9 months later, one tabloid alone ran 21 consecutive cover stories tearing that image apart, one more than the New York Post gave to September the 11th. Everyone knows the headline, "He cheated and she left." But the woman at the center of it, Elin Nordegren, has spent 16 years letting that headline stand, while the real answer sat one generation further back than anyone bothered to look. It was 2001, and Elin was working as a nanny for the Swedish professional golfer Jesper Parnevik and his wife, having moved to the United States with the family the year before. Tiger Woods had been asking for an introduction for the better part of a year by the time the Parneviks finally made it happen that summer at the British Open. 2 years later, on a game reserve in South Africa, he proposed. They married in October of 2004 in Barbados, and for the next 5 years, the two of them were sold to the public as the closest thing sports had to a fairy tale. Even Jesper Parnevik, the man who introduced them, would later tell reporters, quote, "I really feel sorry for Elin and admit that he and his wife had believed Tiger was a far better man than he turned out to be." A 5-acre estate in Windermere, Florida, a daughter, Sam, born in 2007, a son, Charlie, born in 2009, and a husband who, by every public account, was the most disciplined athlete alive. That discipline was the whole brand. Winning golf tournaments was almost the least of it. Tiger controlled everything around him, his swing, his diet, his schedule, his public image, down to the smallest detail. What nobody outside his inner circle knew yet was that the same man had built an entire second life running underneath the first one, quietly, for years. And as we're about to see, he hadn't invented that particular blueprint himself. He inherited it. 4 days before Thanksgiving, 2009, the National Enquirer published a story naming a New York club manager, Rachel Uchitel, as the woman Tiger Woods was sleeping with. His camp denied it hard. Then, in the early hours of November 27th, police were called to the house in Windermere. Tiger had driven his Cadillac Escalade into a fire hydrant and then a tree, at low speed just outside his own driveway. According to the police report, he was pulled from the car by Elin, who used a golf club to break a back window and get him out. For about 48 hours, that was the whole story. A strange, minor car accident involving the world's best golfer. Then it stopped being minor, and it never really stopped again. Within 2 weeks, more than a dozen women had either come forward publicly or been named in connection with Tiger Woods, spanning years of the marriage, and some later tallies put the number over 20. The coverage didn't fade the way these stories usually do. It compounded week after week, straight through the winter. The sponsors moved even faster than the tabloids did. Accenture cut ties first, then AT&T, then a half dozen others, each one quietly ending a partnership built entirely on the idea that this man was exactly who he appeared to be. By December, Tiger had checked into 45 days of inpatient therapy, and the golfer who hadn't missed a tournament in years disappeared from the sport completely. On February 19, 2010, he came back into public view just once, walking into a conference room at TPC Sawgrass in Florida, in front of about 40 hand-selected friends, colleagues, and family, to read a statement for 13 minutes. His mother, Kaltala, sat in the small audience, watching. Elin did not. At the 6-minute mark, he finally said the sentence the entire room was waiting for. Quote, "I was unfaithful," he said. "I had affairs. I cheated." He used part of that same appearance to shut down one specific rumor on his own, telling the room flatly that nothing physical had ever happened between them, at home or anywhere else, and that whatever blame belonged in this story, none of it belonged to her. The final settlement, reported at around $100 million, came wrapped in strict confidentiality, which is a large part of why we're still piecing this together instead of hearing it directly from either of them. But here's the detail almost none of these stories bother to dig for. The one that actually explains how a man that controlled could be living 2 separate lives at once without either one knowing about the other. He learned it at home, and the story of that home starts with something almost nobody mentions when they talk about the name Tiger Woods. Earl Woods, Tiger's father, was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, a Green Beret who served 2 combat tours in Vietnam with Army Special Forces. On his second tour, stationed alongside South Vietnamese forces, he fought beside an officer named Phong, a man Earl considered so fearless under fire that he gave him a nickname, Tiger. Phong saved Earl's life more than once in the field. When Saigon fell in 1975 and Earl lost contact with him for good, he named his own newborn son after his old friend, a private wartime tribute that most of the sports world has spent 3 decades assuming was just a nickname for a golfer. While Earl was still married to his first wife, a marriage that had already produced 3 children, he was stationed overseas in Thailand and met a young receptionist working on the army base, Kultida Punsawad. He and Kultida began seeing each other, and the affair ran for more than a year before Earl finally divorced his first wife in 1968 and married Kultida in Brooklyn the following year. The exact pattern Tiger would go on to live out decades later, a second life running underneath a public marriage, is close to the same pattern his own father used to build the marriage that produced him. And according to the fullest account of Earl's life, it did not stop there. In 2018, investigative journalist Jeff Benedict and Armin Katayan published a biography, simply titled Tiger Woods, that became a #1 New York Times bestseller and the basis for an Emmy-nominated HBO documentary called Simply Tiger. Built on hundreds of interviews with people across every corner of Tiger's life, the book documents that Earl's infidelity did not end when his first marriage did. It continued into the marriage with Kultida too, the same marriage that raised the boy the entire world would eventually call Tiger. He grew up inside a house where his father was held up publicly, in television specials and magazine profiles, as the devoted architect of a champion, while privately running a completely different life underneath it. Kultida, by every account, knew, and she stayed anyway, pouring everything she had into turning her son into the golfer the world eventually got. Nobody ever sat Tiger down and taught him how to be a husband. He'd already watched one performed, at close range for his entire childhood, and he'd watched his own mother absorb it and never leave. It also explains something about the public version of Tiger Woods that never quite added up on its own: the sheer control. This was a golfer who could stand over a 6-foot putt with a major championship on the line and look completely unbothered, who managed his diet, his training, his image, and his brand with the same exacting precision he brought to his swing. That kind of control is not something a person invents out of nothing. It is something a person learns to perform, usually by watching somebody else do it first, at close range, for years. Tiger did not just inherit his father's talent for blocking out pressure on a golf course. He inherited his father's talent for running an entire second life, underneath a public one, without either audience ever finding out about the other. It's worth noticing what Tiger himself said and didn't say about why any of this happened. In his own apology, he offered an explanation of his own, that years of success had convinced him the normal rules didn't apply to him anymore, that fame and fortune had put temptation within easy reach, and he had simply stopped resisting it. That's a real answer. It just isn't a complete one. His own accounting stopped at his own choices. It never once reached back far enough to name the household he grew up inside, the one where the exact same performance was already running before he could walk, before he even had the name that performance gave him. That's the actual reframe here, and it's not an excuse for what came next. Elin never once treated it as one, and neither should we. It's a mechanism, not a pardon. The 2 separate lives Earl ran, without his own son ever fully seeing them collide, is close to the exact architecture Tiger rebuilt for himself as an adult, except with far more money, far more fame, and far more opportunity to make it worse than his father ever had. So when this video's title asks for the real reason Elin left Tiger Woods, the honest answer was never really about one crashed car on one November night. She had married into a pattern that was already a full generation deep before she ever showed up. And once she saw it clearly, in the worst possible way, there was no version of staying married that didn't mean raising her own 2 children inside that same pattern. If you're finding this as interesting as we did putting it together, this is the exact kind of story we dig into every week, so it's worth hitting subscribe now before we get to how Elin actually answered all of this. Because it isn't the answer most people expect. Elin Nordegren has never sat down for a tell-all. In her entire life, she's given one major interview about any of this to People magazine, published in August of 2010 as the divorce was finalized. In it, she pushed back directly on the tabloid claim that she'd attacked Tiger with the golf club that night. Quote, "There was never any violence inside or outside our home," she said, calling the speculation truly ridiculous, the exact same version of events Tiger himself had already confirmed at his own press conference months earlier. She also said something the tabloids covered far less, that she had tried for months to save the marriage before finally accepting it was over, and that the year behind her had been the hardest of her entire life. That's the entire record, in her own words, that exists from Elin Nordegren about the worst year of her life. 15 years of silence after that single interview isn't an absence of an answer. At a certain point, the silence is the answer. She chose her 2 children over a public war she could have easily started, and very possibly won, in the court of public opinion. Look at what she actually did with the years that followed, because it tells you more than a second interview ever could have. In May of 2014, Elin walked across a stage at Rollins College in Florida and graduated with a psychology degree, a 3.96 grade point average, and the school's top academic honor. After 9 years of night classes taken around 2 newborns and a scandal that broke while she was still enrolled. Along the way, one of the school's own assistant deans singled out work she had quietly been doing off campus, helping children in the foster care system, the same population of kids growing up, in one way or another, without the kind of stable household she was working every night to build for her own too. In her graduation speech, she called that period the wild storm of my personal life, and closed with the closest thing to a personal mission statement she has ever given the public, that whatever else had been taken from her over the previous 4 years, an education never could be. She has since gone on to become a licensed mental health counselor and opened her own practice, the exact career she had quietly been working toward since long before any of this happened. She built a private, deliberately unglamorous life after the scandal, mostly out of camera range, raising Sam and Charlie away from the version of childhood their own father had grown up inside. Meanwhile, Tiger's own reckoning with all of this has been strange and inconsistent, which is its own kind of evidence about how deep the pattern actually ran. In December of 2015, he told Time magazine that Elin had become one of his, quote, best friends. Around that same period, in a separate on-record interview, when he was asked directly whether he regretted the affairs themselves, he said his only real regret in life was not spending 1 more year at Stanford. Then, in his 2017 memoir, he wrote that his regret will last a lifetime and that his own dishonesty and selfishness had caused Elin intense pain. 3 different answers in 3 different years about the exact same decade of his life. Make of that what you want. By 2026, the story neither of them saw coming is the one actually playing out right now. Tiger is in a public relationship with Vanessa Trump, Donald Trump Jr.'s ex-wife, confirmed since March of 2025. This year alone brought a DUI arrest and a rollover crash near his Florida home in March, followed by rehab, and then Vanessa's own breast cancer diagnosis in May, which she has spoken about publicly, while asking for privacy, almost the exact same request Elin made of the public 16 years earlier. On the golf course, separate from any of that, Tiger has spent the year trying to engineer one more comeback, hosting his own tournament, the Genesis Invitational, and teasing a return to competition at the Masters this spring, chasing one more chapter of the career the scandal once threatened to end for good. Elin, meanwhile, has built an entirely separate second family with her longtime partner, former NFL player Jordan Cameron, and their 3 children together. Their 2 oldest kids are grown now, and both of them chose golf. Sam is a freshman on the golf team at Stanford, the same school Tiger has spent years saying he wishes he had stayed at longer. And on February 24th of this year, at a ring ceremony on the golf course at the Benjamin School in Palm Beach Gardens, Tiger and Elin stood on the same stage again, side by side, to watch their son Charlie collect his state championship ring, just weeks after he had committed to play college golf at Florida State, starting in the fall of 2027. No press conference, no joint statement, just 2 people who lived through one of the ugliest scandals in modern sports history, choosing over and over for 16 straight years to show up for the same 17-year-old. So if you came here for a secret, the actual secret is that there isn't one. The real reason Elin Nordegren left Tiger Woods was never really about one crashed car outside a Florida mansion. It's a pattern that started with a father Tiger never got to choose, in a name Tiger never got to choose either. Confirmed in public on one November night and answered by Elin not with a press conference, but with a psychology degree, 2 kids raised out of the spotlight, and a stage in Palm Beach Gardens 16 years later where she showed up anyway. We've got the story of what that same collapse did to Tiger's own career on screen right now, and it's just as different from what you've heard as this one was.